talk about skin color and the issue of identity. And we have here Kristin Dieng. She's a Muslim American. As you can see, she's white, and she converted to Islam a few years ago and married to African Americans. And, the double whammy here as a white woman, as Muslim, and it's three strikes here against her. Welcome to the show, Kristin.
Thanks, Alfred.
You know, we talked about this before when you converted to Islam early on. And you wore a hijab and all of this, but you felt that as a white woman, you felt like you are losing something of your identity. So tell us a little bit about, take us through before, you know, this is happening years back, and now how it feels now in the midst of all this issue of race relationship, Muslim and Arab community.
Right. So I started studying Islam when I was 14 and studied it throughout school, through college, and eventually did convert. I married my husband, who's from West Africa, and started practicing Islam. I converted based on my own studies. I didn't convert based on being married. I actually went to live in a Muslim country. I thought it was important that I lived within a Muslim culture before I decided whether I wanted to take that community on. So I did convert, and I kept studying, and I ended up deciding that I wanted to wear hijab. I thought that theologically it was required. My husband was actually not in favor of me putting it on at the time. He thought it would be too much, that I was a new convert, that there were other things that I needed to focus on. But my own personal belief was I wanted to wear it, so I did. I put it on, and very quickly learned that, sorry, my cat here. I very quickly learned.
You have a black cat.
A gray one. So anyway, I very quickly learned that America is quite a different place if you're not white, and if you wear hijab, you are not white anymore. You're considered something else. To many Americans, you're considered an Arab, but at the same time, they do see your whiteness, and so there's some confusion with them because they assume if you're a Muslim, you have to be Arab, so they can't quite figure out why a white person is a Muslim. So there's kind of an interesting, like you were saying, a double whammy where you get the discrimination targeted at Muslims, but you also have a lot of anger from white Americans coming at you because they feel that you have rejected their culture and their belief system, and they don't like that. So I wore hijab for 3 years and had quite a horrible experience. Twice I had cars drive me off the road. I was repeatedly verbally assaulted and physically assaulted. Years that I had this happen, I never once had anyone ever stand up for me or step in. So that was the start of my experience of being a Muslim.
It's interesting that a lot of Arabs, and not a lot, but a lot of people they came from that part of the world, and also in the Somali community, and even from the African American community, they have their own prejudice against darker skin too, and a lot of people will try to use skin whiteness and try to lighten skin, will look down on the darker skin, and here you have somebody white that having this, you know, a different problem, looking at you as not a real white if you are a Muslim.
It was very interesting to me because we all discussed the concept of privilege, and you are very aware of what that privilege is when it's lost. I studied race relations. I was very interested in apartheid, the civil rights movement. So I had the education on the topic, but it's quite a different experience when it's actually you living the experience. And I very quickly learned that those privileges were gone as soon as I took on the Muslim identity. One of the ones that I thought was the most pervasive was that people stopped being kind to me. People didn't smile at me. People who worked in stores and in public places were not kind. There was a lot of passive aggressive attention. There were a lot of people that were unhappy with my experience with what I was doing. They might not say anything, but there was a lot of glaring. There's a lot of body language that was very aggressive. It was interesting to me how friendly people are when they look like you, and when they don't look like you anymore, that friendliness and that kindness is withdrawn. There are a lot of privileges I could list, but I think that's one that a lot of white people are very unaware that they walk around getting that kindness, and that when it's stripped away from them, they have a very different experience with society.
You were getting those reaction or negative reaction when you're wearing your hijab as a white woman.
Right.
Now, obviously, you're not wearing hijab, and you don't write on your forehead that you are a Muslim. You don't have the Quran hanging from your, your neck. So, and you can pass. There's no problem there unless you start going to the mosque or praying or whatever, and you probably do that privately. What would be the reaction from the Muslim community? Was predominantly non-white. Their acceptance, they accept you as a fully Muslim or member of the community.
Yeah, so I think that's I ended up taking off hijab right before 9/11 happened. I had health issues and it became very difficult to wear it. And taking it off was a very hard decision. I did continue to believe in it. I took it off, and for me, the thing that was just amazing is, once again, people acknowledged me as a human being. To be honest, I had forgotten what that was like. It's pretty amazing when that kindness and that respect and that just acknowledgement of who you are is returned to you when it's been lost. It would be very hard to go back to that. I've chosen to continue not wearing it for a lot of reasons. That is definitely one of them. I'm ashamed to say it. I hate that I would allow society's behavior toward me to dictate what my choices are. But the truth is that I actually have 3 boys. They're 20, 18, and 10, and my whiteness protects them. I'm quite aware that that is a privilege. I'm aware that by me walking in stores with my sons, we don't get the same racist attitudes or treatment because I'm with my sons. I'm aware that when I call the school because someone has once again called my son the N-word, that I can advocate and get angry in a way that perhaps a Black parent could not. So yeah, it's interesting the kind of choices that you make to decide whether you want to be visibly Muslim or if you want to look visibly white. It's a complicated situation. But as you say, when I took off hijab, I gave up the fact that Muslims used to say Assalamu alaikum to me all the time, that Muslims were kind to me, that they acknowledged me as one of their own. Looking like I do, that acknowledgement is completely stripped away. If I greet people, I definitely do not greet greetings back. I get a look of confusion. So it's hard. It's when you're not looking Muslim, you're kind of floating in between societies. You don't exactly belong to the Muslim community. You don't really belong to the non-Muslim community anymore. You're kind of floating in between them all. And then having a Black husband and a Black children, once again, I'm floating between the Black community and the American white community. So it's kind of an interesting position to be in.
Your kids are very strong, and tell us about one of them actually went to study in Japan. He was very comfortable there. He wanted to stay there.
He did. He went to study abroad in Japan for a year. This was his senior year. He's 18. And he loved it there. He felt very welcome, very embraced. The racism that you experience in the United States is I'm not going to say it's non-existent there, but he didn't experience it. He felt people were incredibly kind to him. He loved being there. He ended up having to come home early because of COVID-19. He was very disappointed. He felt that they were handling it very well. Their numbers were actually quite a bit less than ours. So in many ways, we felt he was safer there. But his organization decided to send him home. So now he's back home, and once again, he's surrounded by this whole situation with George Floyd and all of the rest of the protests.
Were they nice to him in Japan? Because they have no problem with black and skin color, or because he was an American?
I think it's hard to know. I've talked to a lot of people who are Black who have lived in Japan, and the general consensus is they don't feel they experience much racism, that it's barely there, that people are generally very kind. It's hard to talk about more than his personal experience. He is very charming. He has a very good sense of humor. So he does a really good job of kind of winning people over. He did a good job of that in his school. So I think they liked him just because of who he was, the persona he has, but who knows?
Is he using this here? Is it easier to be charming African-American here in this country? It's harder.
It's really interesting because he's a quieter person in American culture. I think a different side of him, he felt open there to be a little bit of a different person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I suppose it's the nuance of it. You think if he stayed there a few more years, now he can realize the subtlety of racism in the society, because the Japanese understand they have also issue with not different race, other, if you are Korean or
they do. If they have a lot of discrimination against Koreans.
So they're not out of the woods. They have issue too in discrimination against people with different background or different. So sometimes when you go to a new place, you don't recognize some of the subtlety, entry part of the illness of a society. So
yes.
It will be a confusing conversation for a white mother talking to a black husband and black kids about racism and police brutality and what's happening in this country that has a history of long dark history. So what kind of conversation you have at home?
It's interesting because I read a book by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and he talks about the white community, not so much as a color, as a race, but as a mentality in the United States. I believe that when I had my experience with hijab for 3 years, I lost that mentality. I became an outsider to that mentality. And so I realize that visibly I look white, and my family all the time is like, you do know you're white, right? But the truth is that I live in a Black family. I exist in the Muslim community. I'm not looking at myself in the mirror very often. Instead, I'm interacting with people of color all of the time. So my mentality, I think, has really shifted. My sense of identity of who I am has shifted. I'm still quite aware that I'm white, that I have the privilege of being white. And as I said, I protect my family with that privilege. But when I'm talking to my kids or my husband, I think it's more I'm on the people of color mindset of that community, identify with that community more. It makes sense.
And a lot of people talking about the difference between being anti-racism and being active, using your white privilege to do something about it. It's not enough to be an anti-racist person. You need to do something about it. You need to take action, and I think you're doing that. Well, Kristin, it's a great honor, really, to have this conversation. Very enlightening, to be honest. So many conversations going on. This is a very insightful conversation from you. I learned a lot. The dilemma of living between those two worlds, not just when you go out of the house or in the street, but also at home all the time. So we wish you well. We wish your family well.
Can I say one thing, like in response to what you're saying?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just very quickly. It's a little unfortunate, but I found that often people like to listen to voices of people who are similar to them. They can relate to them. They're more open to hearing what they have to say. And I think it's unfortunate that often it takes the voice of a white person to speak up and to say these things and to discuss discrimination for other people to listen. That is really unfortunate, but it's also, I consider it a privilege that I do get to pass between these different communities. I think it's a unique experience. It's not something that many people get to have. And so while it can be often uncomfortable, it's also really nice that I get to exist in the white community and the African community and the Muslim community and just the communities of color. I don't think a lot of white people get that chance. And so you do have to speak up. You have to use this opportunity to share your experience so that people will listen. So it's an interesting privilege and challenge, but it's one that is my life and defined by all these, different connections in the different communities I have.
Thank you so much again, and good luck. And we really appreciate your experience and appreciate sharing it with us. And